It's 1:30. I'd like to call the meeting of the April 17th, 2023 Traffic and Transportation Commission meeting to order. We'll go ahead and start with roll call. Commissioner Varnell.
Here.
Commissioner Littlefield. Here. Ward 3 is vacant. Go to Commissioner Hale.
Here, sir.
Commissioner Schuline. As for Commissioner Wynn, he's not available, and Commissioner George is not available, and Commissioner Cornett.
Here.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to have a motion concerning the approval of the Traffic and Transportation Commission meeting minutes for March 20th, 2023.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved from Commissioner Hale. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Cornett. Any discussion? We have a motion to approve the minutes from March 20th, 2023 from Commissioner Hale, seconded by Commissioner Cornett. Votes, please. Yay. And item has passed. All in favor with one abstain. We go now to item 3, reports from Traffic Services Division in the Municipal Counselor's Office. Let me ask the counselor first. Do you have anything for us, sir?
No, sir, not today.
All right, thank you very much. Traffic Service?
All right, you've got our monthly report of administratively installed yield signs and parking controls. And this month, we've got a presentation from the Public Works Director on Ms. Eric Winger on traffic impact fees. This was requested by Commissioner Littlefield at the February meeting because he had questions about funding for traffic improvements and other items that come out of the Traffic Commission hearings. So Mr. Winger is here today for a presentation on street development fees.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Eric Winger. I'm the Public Works Director for Oklahoma City, and happy to update and kind of just do an overview and where we're headed with street system development fees. So we'll go over the history, a little bit of an overview, what we've done with engineering studies, recommended projects, and next steps. So for those that may not be completely familiar with streets development or impact fees, in Oklahoma City, until the impact fees were implemented, the primary funding source for most things related to streets and roads is our bond issues. We also relied heavily on local developers to put in traffic improvements, whether it be new signals or different traffic controls as a part of commercial or residential developments. There was also a lot of confusion with that era where there was a lot of traffic studies being done. You can imagine where you have 2 intersecting arterial streets with 4 different corners. We would sometimes see as many as 4 different traffic studies, one from each of the owners of each corner, with usually the last developer that went in being responsible for all the improvements. We did not traditionally do those incrementally, and so a lot of just confusion in that. And so with the introduction of street development impact fees, we have resolved that. The city is now doing those comprehensive traffic studies. We're doing those citywide, so it eliminates the need for developers to have to do them independently, although some still do to make sure that their traffic flow, especially out of larger developments, is managed properly. It's also a supplement now to the bond funds where we're collecting a fee that is specific for that purpose. It's specific for enhancing and increasing the capacity of the street system throughout the city. So when we look back at that history, the impact fees were adopted by the City Council in 2017. This is that ordinance. It was actually adopted in 2016. It went into effect in January of 2017. The ordinance also includes parks impact fees, which I'm not presenting on today. It actually included both, but the part that we'll talk more about is the streets portion of the program. So what you have here, everything that is in color on this map is area of the city of Oklahoma City. You're going to see small numbers in each one of these areas. These are the benefit areas outlined in the ordinance that is actually part of the requirement for the collection of those fees. What this does is that fees collected in each area stay within that area. So if you're in C1, Core 1, all those fees stay in C1. Conversely, if you're in new growth 5, all those fees stay in 5, but that way the monies, especially as they're collected, because these have very different growth areas, and I'll mention that in just a minute. Some of the areas have grown tremendously and have raised millions of dollars. Other areas have not grown quite nearly as fast, especially when you look in some of the rural areas of Oklahoma City. And we still haven't actually initiated a project in a couple of those areas. So there's 14 different areas.
And sir, what's the difference between the I? What does the I stand for?
So the I is infill,
Is with what?
is infill,
Infill, okay.
and I should explain that a little bit more. So C is core, I is infill, N is new growth, and R is rural. And these were all defined, and there was a lot of partnering when the ordinance was first put together with the planning department. And so everything that you're seeing with the division of the areas, the outlines of the benefit areas, all followed a lot of the comprehensive planning documentation to ensure that it was correct. And again, we were looking for just a number of areas. You'll see that it does not line up with wards. It doesn't line up with other general areas. It's independent of just for streets. I'll make one last statement. The parks are not the same. So if you were to open the ordinance and you had some interest in the parks impact fees, there's actually only 5 parks benefit areas. They also have a core, but then they've generally got a northeast, southeast, northwest, southwest, just as a differentiation. So, ordinance is adopted. It goes into effect in 2017. Monies then begin to start being collected on developments as the building permits and things are pulled for each of those areas. And the very first thing that we needed to do is actually complete engineered studies of each benefit area to start identifying those list of projects that were prioritized in each area. So 4 engineers were hired, 14 different studies were initiated, and they basically studied the entire city. And those were completed. We actually had some early start projects that were very easily identified. We had enough money at a time where we could initiate a few of those projects early. But since then, we've actually have a total of 75 total projects in all the areas combined. Projects are underway in many of the areas already, but we're actually on our second round of studies in 2 of the benefit areas that already maximized the projects that were identified a couple of years ago. We're having to restudy those areas now because of the tremendous growth going forward. So the recommendations of the traffic studies are what we're following. One of the things as we look at impact fees, the studies have to support an increase in street capacity, and I think that's a really important statement to make. So I know sometimes there's some confusion about there is this signal that was approved at a certain location. Can impact fees support paying for that signal? And in most cases, the answer is no. If it's just a signal that's being added and it's not priority on the impact fee list and it doesn't increase capacity, it can't be funded. But there are a lot of signals that can be, especially when we're adding turn lanes, either left turn, dedicated right turn, if we're doing intersection reconfigurations. But as you start looking at the list of projects, you're going to see those that do have signal improvements are adding capacity. And not every signal does that. So here's examples of some of the project types that came out of those 14 studies. Widening, obviously, is one that adds capacity, so there's lots of turn lane recommendations. Here's an example at Reno and Mustang. You can see the new right turn lanes being added to that intersection. Looking at the next, when we look at a reconfiguration, it can be a matter of completely restriping an intersection based on an engineering analysis and study that shows that different lane configurations can increase capacity. And then there's also the ones that we're just looking at different traffic control devices, some that are comprehensive that can be median, turn signal, any other types of traffic control throughout the system, but each comes from an engineered analysis. So I know you cannot read this. We did hand out, and there is a copy of the packet, and we can provide you additional information if needed, but this is what that project list looks like with all 75 projects. So this is just the core projects, so I know this is a little easier to read, but what you're seeing on here is that you're seeing that we're tracking the engineers that are working on the designs. The ones that are highlighted in blue are the ones that actually are funded with available funds. The ones that are in white have not yet begun because there's money not yet collected to the level that we can initiate that project. So Core 1 has about half of its projects underway. Starting to look at the infill projects on this next sheet, you'll see there's 3 different infill areas. You'll see they're all being collected independently. You can see that there's 2 to 3 projects in each of these categories that are moving forward. Looking next at new growth, This is
Sir-
where we
sir,
actually
If you could go back to the inflow, is that the right word?
infill.
Infill. Could you explain that, why that term is used in that sector?
So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get it as correct as the planning department could, but we can maybe invite them if they're prepared. But again, they're following a lot of what's in the comp plan based on a lot of the land type and designations that you'll find in that plan that's been adopted by the city council. So new growth and infill and core and rural are all terms that are in the comp plan, just to designate different types of areas. Okay. And then this last one is on the rural, and again, you'll see that this is the one that we're seeing the slowest movement in most cases, not just nearly the growth that you see when you're in the core or the new growth, but you will see that we've at least completed the studies in those areas. You'll see that we're just waiting on additional funding so that we can kick off those first or second projects. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom this map. This is just to show you that we're tracking this on a map. And so, just thinking about it, we may just go with what we can see here. Thank you, Mary. So again, looking at the city, we've got all of the locations. You can see they're spread throughout the city. This does not show, I mean, you've got the benefit areas that are in the gray tones. You can see the benefit area designations in red in the middle. The yellow projects are the ones that are planned, not yet underway. The ones that are green are underway, either in construction, in design, or coming very soon. Here's that map a little bit better. I know it's a little bit on the fuzzy side, but the whole point would be is that we're trying to show that there are projects citywide that are being completed with just impact fee funds. In some cases, we can supplement the funds if there's some companion bond funds, if there's maybe a partnership project that we were working on with one of the counties, that's possible. We have not had to do that or have not done that just yet. Everything that you see on this page is completely impact fee funded. And then this is just a total. So again, looking at the benefit areas on the far left, core 1, the I's are the infills, the N are the new growth, the R are the rurals. You can see how much revenue to date has been collected in each of those categories, and you can see the total, a little over $37 million. You can see that we've approved projects, a total number of 37 for about $35 million. But then you can see the list that's waiting for additional funds to be collected, which is the planned and unfunded total, and there's 38 additional projects in that column that just as soon as those impact fee funds are in the benefit area, we can initiate that next project down on that project list. So, current status, we're continuing to do that design. We have project staff that are dedicated to completing these projects. Mentioned the 37 and the 38. Benefit areas New Growth 1 and New Growth 6 are the two benefit areas that have already maximized all the projects that were identified in that initial report. So we're actually in the second round of reports already in those two benefit areas for new projects. And then we also do give annual reporting to the city council. So usually during the summer, there's an annual report that the finance department helps us with, gets presented to the council that does much the same of what I've shown you today, highlights the projects that have been worked on, the revenue totals, the expenditure totals going forward. So with that, that really is a summary and where we're at with the traffic impact fees. Doesn't include the parks, as I mentioned, but I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have as a commission.
Thank you for your presentation today. I appreciate that. I just had one quick question. For capacity, that's just auto capacity. That doesn't have anything to do with increasing capacity for like the rapid transit or like adding on a bus lane potentially or doing any kind of bike lane or anything improvement. Is it just car capacity?
So it is for vehicular capacity for now. That's where the focus, the focus has been on the studies. It's been on the vehicular capacity of the roadway in Oklahoma City. So there are opportunities that we could start looking at things like PED capacity possibly. I need to get a legal opinion on whether or not transit specifically is a mode that would be included as a part of the impact fees. But again, as it pertains to the roadway, as long as the capacity of the roadway is increasing, then it would be an eligible project. Second part of that is there's a lot of projects and then it comes down to priority. So the engineers that are put on the projects are also looking at highest priority to lowest priority as they're designating those projects, and we're trying to work those in that order. So again, as we try to increase the traffic capacity due to development, obviously the development has put some new circumstance in those benefit areas that's requiring new work to be done. That's where the focus has been thus far. Yeah.
And this has nothing to do with fixing roads that the new construction damaged or any of that nature?
So it prohibits maintenance of any kind with the use of impact fees.
Okay.
It has to be new construction, it cannot be maintenance.
You know, Ward 4, which is my ward, we're very rural out there, southeast. And what we're seeing is when a new housing area goes in with 100, 200 houses that was rural, that was ag, let's say it was ag, and they took these 40, 80 acres and turned it into housing. Just the construction of that area of 150 to 200 houses, those roads were not made for that amount of, one, driving, and two, the heavy vehicles. So what we're seeing is damage to the roadways, a lot of times like at the four-way stops where the trucks have to come in and they're creating those bumps and all that stuff. Going off the edge of the road, so a lot of edge road problems. So now we have 200 houses, that's 400 more cars with now some rural street damage. How does that factor into anything that we can look at?
So the Public Works Department as a whole is continually monitoring the condition of city streets, and we do have crews available, contractors if needed, to actually go out and make road repairs as they're identified. So outside of the impact fees, that would be a core service of the City of Oklahoma City that we would provide. We concur that we do traditionally see some damages with new construction just because of the new volumes and some of the weights of the vehicles. If we perhaps did have suspicion that overweight vehicles were being used, we do investigate that. And in the case where we find that there is somebody that has put an overweight vehicle on a city street, there is a means to actually fine and pursue that. That happens a lot less than we may think. The roads in Oklahoma City are all built to a public standard. We are seeing that we're having to modify those engineering standards, and a lot of it has to do with larger size trash trucks, larger sized fire trucks. A lot of new delivery services that don't just include the U.S. mail are putting a lot larger trucks in rural communities than we've seen before too. So there are some new standards that are being adopted so that we can actually help assist that going forward with new construction. But I use your benefit area as one of those examples. Even with all those new rooftops and the fee is collected, you know, a road widening project is quite expensive in Oklahoma City. Right now, it ranges between $5 and $6 million to take a 2-lane to a 4-lane for 1 mile. And some of these benefit areas just simply haven't collected that amount of money for us to focus on that. So lastly, I would just say, as we focus on roads and road growth, we're continually looking at that for projects in the next bond issue. And perhaps in this next bond issue, we'll see some more combination projects where you'll see some combination bond fund, impact fee funded projects. But the planning's underway for the next bond issue now, so hopefully in the next 2 or so short years, we'll have a pretty accurate list of what's to come.
Could you give an example of how much an impact fee is?
So in the ordinances, there's actually tables that are included in there. So each benefit area has its own portion of the table, and the fee is adjusted based, 1, on the benefit area, and then 2, based on the use. So I don't have the fees memorized, but for example, if you're a 7-Eleven with a high generation of trips, your fee is higher than, say, a warehouse that has a fewer number of trips. But obviously, if you're a convenience store, your square footage is what is calculated on. The warehouse is larger footage, the small convenience store, smaller footage. And so there was a study done to actually prepare all those fees that are in Chapter 60. So you can open that. There's a calculator that's used in the building department. So development services, when you make an application for new construction, you type in the type, they look at the benefit area, and it auto-generates the fee as a part of your permit. So it's quite easy and it's calculable so that you as a builder know right up front what that cost is going to be. Clarification, no fees for any renovated structures. It's only for new footage added. So again, as you go to a traffic impact, it's increasing the size of a building, increasing building on a footprint or a site. That's when the fee comes in so that we can address the traffic needs by increasing the traffic capacity.
So adding on to a building
Would generate a fee.
would fee, but just to redo a building?
Just to remodel a building would not,
Okay.
correct.
All right,
Completely,
that's- yeah.
completely based on new square footage.
Okay, that's all I have. I think we have some over here, okay?
You are now.
I am now. I am so bad with this stuff up here, it's ridiculous. This has been it's very well done and very beneficial. What motivated the request to learn about traffic or development impact fees was this body fairly often hears applications for traffic signals. Probably the best examples are farther out areas where, I'll just pick one out of my hat, 150th and May Avenue or something like that, where there's been a long-standing neighborhood for 25 or 30 years, and that's about it. And then all of a sudden, moving forward, there's a huge commercial development that goes in across the street from that neighborhood. And they come before us and they request traffic lights, which include all the left turn lanes and the widening, et cetera. And it's primarily for safety. And we approve those things fairly often. And when we approve them, there's no funding for them. We know how that works. And so what I think my question specifically is how does this program address a particular situation like the example that I just gave, and where does that put that neighborhood in that timeline for getting that traffic signal built and installed, or at least on a list that's not 10 or 15 years from now and dependent solely on bond money? My logic says if there's a development and it impacts something across the street from it, it would seem reasonable to me, of course I understand why it can't be, but it would seem reasonable to me that it could address that quicker. And I understand the flow of traffic explanation, but I think safety is also a huge factor. We had, over the past couple of months, some really serious dialogue about the need for traffic lights around a school downtown. And that's a major safety issue. And apparently traffic impact fees are something that can't be applied to that, or could there be discussion about changing the way they're applied to that?
So to answer the question, the impact fees are provided for through state statute. So there's a very prescribed set of rules on that. If a city adopts an impact fee, it has to follow a very strict guideline for the set of rules. Safety is not one of the criteria for impact fees. It really is generated based on capacity increase only. The other big rule that is a part of the impact fees, or the big merit, is that the fees have to stay in the area in which they were generated. So obviously that benefit area study was very critical to get correct, to have assurances given to the developers that at least the money they paid in the area might not be able to go to the signal immediately adjacent to the development, but it would at least be in the area of their development that also increased the trips, the traffic, and the capacities. So there is a list of unfunded traffic signals that this commission has approved that do not have funds to date. And what Public Works has done in the past with the assistance of Stuart Chai and his office is that list is brought before the City Council when we prepare plans for the next bond issue, with the goal to try to fund every one of those previously approved traffic signals. It doesn't preclude the developer from funding the signal. So obviously they still come to the commission and have to get the warrant and the approval, but the city's also not suggesting they don't construct it as a part of the new development. And we've seen that happen, especially on the larger developments that are insistent of the safety aspect or the convenience aspect. They'll build it on their own. But we will continue to look at the list of unfunded, including the ones recently approved by this commission as part of downtown school. And if there are other opportunities that we can find, maybe they're not impact fees, but other funding sources or grants or things like that, that's also another possibility. It just isn't impact fees in this case.
Well, and that brings up a point, just to clarify, when you do a grant, no, a bond, and you say, okay, we want these 10 signal lights for this one bond, and that gets approved, you can't pull a signal light out of there and insert a new approved one into that? Is that true?
That's generally correct, yes. So once the signal locations are listed in the bond, there is the promise to the voter that votes yes, that you're going to build those 10 or 12 or however many that are in that list. You know, and I say generally, there is always that case where we have certain projects in Oklahoma City, either through annexation, de-annexation, that are a listed project, but by the time we get to construction, there's been a de-annexation and they're no longer in the city. In those cases, those projects can't be built if they're not within the city. And we've had that occurrence in the past, not on very many projects, but every so often that has occurred. In those cases, and if money were still available after you finish, all of the other projects on the list, you could designate new projects. But it would be after all the other projects were finished.
Right, so we can't recommend to anybody to say, this is like a very urgent safety, gotta have a light now, let's not do something that's already approved through a bond.
Correct.
We would have to go to city council and ask them, or ask you guys to try to find the money for that specific problem, that it outweighs other issues in the city
Yeah.
of money you can move.
Yes, and so Mr. Chai does do that with me as his director now. We do know that there's certain priority signals that are on your list that we're tracking for opportunities for funding. Obviously, ones that meet more than one warrant, ones that have safety aspects to them. They are prioritized on our list if we were to find some resources to move forward on those. We'll continue to do that as well.
And just for my own, I always say to the applicant, if you really think this is like the number one urgent thing, you need to talk to your city council person. And the city council person, if they agree, can help motivate the staff and the other city councilors to make something happen. That's the place for them to go if they
I mean,
really.
they obviously they can always visit their city council person, absolutely. We
Right.
would encourage them to visit with the department as well. We like to be kind of that front point, but yes, I mean, however the individual may come to the city, either through the Action Center, directly with their council person, or seeking staff, we're going to make sure that they get assistance and at least answers to their
Right,
questions.
and that, you know, and that's what we do tell them is, yep, you're on the unfunded, you gotta wait for the next bond issue, and then it'll be racked and stacked with those 10, 15 that are waiting, and, you know, and all that. But then I also clarify with them that if they really need it now, if they feel that it's that urgent, go talk to your city council person, because they're the ones who control the funds, and they could reallocate as they seem fit. Yeah.
Possibly, yes.
Possible. Well, that's the system.
And I only say that, you know, even in the last bond issue that was voted on in 2017, there was one project that fell below the line. Even though there were a number of signals, there was one that did not make the funding cut for the funds that were made available in the last bond issue. So it was, you know, it's the first on the list, but it's an older signal request that was at this commission maybe, it could be 10 years ago, you know? And
2015,
so
I think.
there isn't it's not automatic that just because it's on the unfunded list that it's going to automatically be approved in the next bond issue. But we'll use that list to make the recommendation to the council, along with any other signals that come onto that list between now and that date for their recommendation and approval.
Right, okay. I just want to make sure I was right that.
Yes.
If there are opportunities for this commission or for members of this commission to kind of uphold and try to push along some funding sources sooner rather than later as far as grants are available, or if you do have something going before city council to try to get something moved up a list or whatever, if there's any way that you can let us know about that, or Stuart can let us know, or somebody, so that we can be privy to that and can actually come up and support those requests, that would be great.
Absolutely. I will tell you that we're pursuing any grant opportunities right now. There's a lot of Investment Job Act opportunities. We haven't found complete fits for those, but we're researching those each time that those come out. But we also work with ACOG annually, and we try to see if we've got any project that scores high in their system that possibly could get its approval too. So I would say outside of the bond issue, ACOG is probably our next real opportunity because they do consider safety as a high-scoring project. So we're actively doing that. But yes, I think Mr. Chai can keep the commissioners updated, and if you have questions, don't hesitate to contact him.
Okay, yes, sir.
A final comment question from me. Another thing that would really help here, in my opinion, and I think from my experience from a few years ago, prior to this program, if the 300-foot notification rule with new development can be successful in notifying these existing neighborhoods that this new commercial development is coming in across the street, it would give that neighborhood and the people in that neighborhood a greater opportunity to work with that developer and accomplish, just as you mentioned, where some developers are more than willing to apply for these traffic signals or other needed measures and fund them as a part of their approval at the Planning Commission. And I think that would be a good approach to this as well, is get ahead of the game before the commercial development is built out and things are coming to us from neighborhoods. Oh, this has caused a problem. Maybe things can be negotiated and resolved at that level. So that's my comment.
And yeah, I think, there's been a number of signals approved by this commission in the past year or two that's exactly what's happening, whether it be the Oak development that has come before the commission. There's some others I know that are in that large category that, again, they're building their own signals because they know that they need them, either part of a street reconfiguration, just the size of the development and convenience to the patrons to get them in and out of the development. But yes, we'll continue to pursue that as the commission, the Planning Commission as well, looks to those.
Okay, very good. Sir?
Question. So it could be 10 years down the road. We approve it, it goes to the unfunded. Before that, so 10 years later, the money comes available. Is there any type of going back to revisit to make sure those same folks want that same change?
We've had that conversation. So the planning for the next bond issue is now just beginning. That list has some older signals on them, and we probably will go through a review using engineering staff and make some decisions. But we haven't started that yet. But the answer is yes. I believe we'll be doing that.
Okay, anything else on this side, everything else over here? All right, well, I want to thank you very much.
Welcome.
It was a very hot item for us to make sure that we understood. So thank you for your time, sir.
You're very welcome.
Okay, there's no items in the consent docket, so we'll go to item 5A. Kyle Merriweather, Whips and Furs Costumes, convert 45-degree reverse angle parking on both sides of Northwest 39th Street between North Youngs Boulevard and North Pennsylvania Avenue to standard head-in 45-degree angle parking. So, sir, we'll start with you, and okay, if I could have your name and address, and you'll have up to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, committee members. My name is Kyle Merriweather. My address, where my business is 2131 Northwest 39th Street, and I'm the owner of Whips and Furs Costume Store. I'm a little bit nervous today, so excuse me if I sound shaky. So I put in this request for the consideration of changing the parking to forward-facing pull-in parking on 39th Street. I know that the back-end parking was something that the city decided to trial out in our neighborhood, but unfortunately, I just don't think that it's working for us over there. A lot of the people in the community park incorrectly all the time. They actually end up crossing over the oncoming traffic lane to park forward on the other side of the street. So then when they exit the parking lane, they're actually going across oncoming traffic and then putting their butt towards oncoming traffic in order to proceed forward. And so it's just really unsafe. I know that we've tried it for about a year now, and it just doesn't seem like people are really applying to the new concept. Back in November of 2022, I sent in an action center request to have the signs made larger. and they actually came back and made the signs larger for us over there. But still, with the signs being simplified and larger, I don't see any compliance to the standard that I think the city was looking for when they first installed the back-end parking. And this is some pictures of the street here. And then also on part of this report, the review does say that to change the parking to forward-facing parking wouldn't change the number of parking spaces or make it more difficult for disabled persons to park in handicapped parking areas. I also know that there were some other examples that were placed when they first put up this idea for the back-end parking. And I looked at some of those places on Google Maps where they do have the back-end parking in other cities, but those streets are a lot different than our 39th Street neighborhood is. I think that back-end parking is more suited for streets where there's 2 lanes on both sides of the street or on one-way streets. So in looking at Plaza District, Paseo District, Midtown, and Enid on Randolph between 2nd and Washington, it's all pull-in parking, as well as on Independence and Main and Enid, it's pull-in parking. On Norman, on James Garner Avenue between Apache and Sims, it is back-in parking, but it's only on one side of the street, and it's also a residential building. And there was an example used in Arlington, Texas. I think they implemented the back-in parking in 2020. I went on Google Maps this morning and looked at some of the streets, and there are still people parked in the opposite direction. And they've had 3 years to work on it over there. So I just don't think, as a community, people really appreciate the back-end parking. A lot of people that come, a lot of my customers and shoppers are really frustrated and confused by the back-end parking. They love the streetscape. But I feel like this is something that is kind of just holding back the community from just that last step of it being able to perform at its tip-top shape. And we have the summer coming up, we have a lot of visitors coming, and I think that that's the reason why a decision really should be made today to get things moving here. So that's everything.
All right, well, thank you very much, sir. Okay, we have, I believe, 3 more people that would like to talk. I think we'll go in order of how I have them. Alfonso, if you come up and give your name and address, and you'll have up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Alonzo Gummerson, and I'm at 2560 Northwest 22nd Street. And Kyle Merriweather is my domestic partner, and I just wanted to end up saying that I'm in full support of Mr. Merriweather's proposal.
All right, thank you very much. And then Burrell Beasley, and sir, name, address, you'll have 5 minutes. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commission members. My name is Burrell Beasley. I am a new business at 2215 Northwest 39th Street, suite number 300. I just opened my Rainbow Bistro last week, so I've been in business for a week now. So thank you, city members and commission members, for all my permits and what you've done to help me to invest in the community and make that area a thriving business center for not only the city, but for others outside of the city. This area has become known as the Mecca of the Southwest for our community. So with that, I just agree with everything that Mr. Merriweather said then as well, that I agree that the parking has been an issue. I've been working at my place. This has been a process since August of last year. So I've been going there every day, in and out, and it's confusion with the parking. People don't understand it. When you try and back in, they honk at you thinking that you're parking wrong. It's just, and I agree with Mr. Merriweather, in DC and Chicago, we're not that. At that time, to put it in, it was a good idea, but I don't think that our citizens in Oklahoma City are ready for it. And as you just saw in the previous presentation, how much the traffic in Oklahoma City has just exploded. People just don't have the time or patience or wherever to even think about how to back into a parking space that we have over there. I also would like to thank you for changing the speed limit to 25 miles per hour then too. That's really been a benefit, and I noticed immediately what a change it was, because I'm afraid for my customers with the back out parking and the speed limit, that they would get hit by a car. And I noticed in the report that there was one pedestrian that was hit, but that's one pedestrian that you know that was been reported that has been hit, because I believe there's probably been others that have been hit on that district then too. So, and also the traffic, the speed limit, and you look in the report then too, it says 36% are going below the speed limit. But that means 64% are speeding through that area still. So again, I would just reiterate that the parking is confusing, that I would suggest that we reverse the reverse parking, and I thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much. And Justin, if I could have your name and address, and you'll have up to 5 minutes.
Justin Conkling, 5617 Northwest 82nd Street. I've been a patron of 39th Street for 23 years now. We were so excited to see that the street was being done. We thank you for that. And furthermore, thank you for the stop signs. They are saving lives, especially the speed limit change. So thank you very much for allowing that to happen. We're so used to it being dangerous, we almost have terms for it, like being Floyded was one guy that was almost killed completely by it. So we try to let each other know this is a really unsafe area. And we were excited with the newness of it all. And then when we saw the back end parking, we thought, well, how unfortunate that it was ruined by that. Of all places to try something new, why would we do it in a bar area where people are not always at their sharpest? It puts us all in jeopardy. And I think it needs to be removed immediately for our safety. Take it to the ultimate. Let's just complete the project, change it maybe even more vertical, going in the direction of the street so we can see perfectly what's happening behind us. Get out and move on. Thank you to Kyle for all his work.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't have any more forms. Does anybody else want to speak on this item? If I could have name, address, you have 5 minutes, and just fill out a form when you're done, sir.
Sure. Justin Henry, Transportation Planner with the Planning Department. So the address is 420 West Main. Just a little background on, we included a letter kind of in the packet for your review. Just a little history on what we did with the street enhancement project is that when we were envisioning it and going through the process with the community, the street segment already had existing bike lanes at the time when the discussions were happening. Throughout the project, part of the vision was to keep it to be a safe bike route. A lot of the early concepts had, including bike lanes and doing parallel parking or doing a cycle track on one side. As we progressed through the discussions with the district, it was kind of determined that the highest priority for the district was to maximize parking. So kind of in a bit of a last-ditch effort to maintain the safety element of that, reverse single parking was included. Reverse single parking statistically does improve safety when you have high compliance rates because you have better visibility to the direction the traffic is coming, especially for things that are small like a cyclist, you have better visibility of it's coming through. When compliance isn't high, you don't get those same safety results. The planning department has, speaking with the district since we became aware of this, and we're kind of would like to take the approach of giving it another try at education and really try to get out there and do some non-punitive enforcement to start out, putting flyers in their windows, trying to really engage with some of the commercial entities more to make them more aware of why we did the reverse single parking, what the potential improvements could be. And so we engaged with our public information and marketing committee here at the city. We would like to take kind of another try at education. And if we can't improve compliance rates, then maybe revisit the item. So, yep, that's all I have.
All right, thank you very much. Please, come on up, sir.
Well, again, Burl Beasley, I'm the owner of Rainbow Bistro on 39th Street District. While the bike lanes are a great idea, people aren't using them. They're not being used for bicycles. People are walking their dogs, they're using the sidewalks. As a business owner going there every day, I've seen that. What they're being used for, quite frankly, is for the homeless people to wheel their shopping carts, because as you know, that's a huge homeless population. So I would refute that argument that those need to remain bike lanes then too. And
Well,
then
now,
also,
just a moment.
Sorry.
I don't think there's actual bike lanes there. Am I
Yeah.
right, sir? There's none. Right. Okay,
They're
so
removed. Okay.
just to clarify, when we discussed this a year and a half to 2 years
Sure.
ago, whatever, They first wanted a bike lane, that 2-3 foot green stripe in that area.
Gotcha.
But they found out that it just wouldn't work with the sidewalks and the parking.
Exactly.
So what was talked about was maybe doing a parallel parking with the bike lane between the car and the sidewalk, that they've seen that before.
Sure.
So that was talked about, but then, as he said, talking to the business owners, it was, we need parking. And
Correct.
angle parking creates more parking than just
Correct.
parallel parking. So there are no bike lanes.
Okay.
And to help the businesses get more parking, it was come to us to say, let's do the reverse angle, and as he said, when you're in your car and you're the driver and you look left, you have straight vision down that roadway. And it is a bike route, and it's a major bike route. And so if bikes are coming down, which is a share the road kind of thing, and they have a right to be on the road, and they're coming down at speed, a lot of times it's hard to see them when you're backing out of an angled with your blockage of your vehicle and the vehicle that's next to you. And so that was the request, was to do the back end to satisfy the bike route
Sure.
without a bike lane. So I just wanted to clarify
Yes.
that to you, that that's what he was talking about.
Thank you for the clarification on that. I would also suggest that my day job is a pharmacist, so if I make a mistake, I kill somebody. So I've also specialized in medication safety, and his other point was that we need to educate the public. Well, we've educated, we've talked, we put up new signs. The least effective way to get somebody to change their behavior is to educate them. That's from my professional opinion. So the best way to do that is to either you mitigate the problem or you put a barrier in place, because education, for right now, has not worked. We've talked about it and talked about it. So I just wanted to just make those 2 points.
All right, thank you
so
very much,
much.
sir. Okay? Yes, sir, please.
Okay, thank you. Kyle Merriweather again. Thank you so much for everything here. So as far as the bicyclists are concerned, we're making a lot of accommodation for these bicyclists that we just don't see them. We don't see the bicyclists biking there or using that street very often. It's there's a lot more people driving vehicles using that area than there are people biking. And I don't know if it's possible or something else to consider, but Northwest 40th Street from North Barnes to Pennsylvania has no parking on either side of the street. So as far as a bicycle lane or being able to designate something as a bicycle path or route, I mean, that little swoop right there has no parking on either side to have to worry about, and it's only just one street over. It's just an idea that I was thinking about. Another part about the biking is I think that it's going to be dangerous either way that somebody parks for the bicyclists. I think that there's pros and cons of both forms of parking. I think that what we're dealing with is that there's more cars using this area than there are bicyclists using this area. So I think as far as education is concerned, that's a great idea. I think that, educating people more that, hey, watch out for bikers. We can put some signs like that out there, because I think we'd have better compliance with people looking out for bicyclists if there were signs like that than people parking the correct way. Yeah, thank you.
All right, very good, sir. Any other talk? Yes, sir, please.
I'm John Gibbons, 2200 Northwest 39th Street, and I'm on the 39th
And if you could
Street
fill that out when you're done.
board.
All right,
You
thank
fill
you.
it out now?
No, after when you're done, sir.
Okay. So, Mr. Littlefield and myself met with Jeff Butler. So we have reverse angled parking. It doesn't work. People don't know what it is. During the day, when you show up on 39th Street, you'll see a lot of people that can read the signs. They're trying to comply, but generally the vast majority of our traffic in our business is in the evening when the signs can't be read. So they have no earthly idea what they're supposed to do. So a majority of the property owners and stakeholders on 39th Street do favor changing it back. But we did agree to participate in a little community information campaign that the city's going to help us with. We're going to do, the 39th Street Board's going to put some pamphlets out on cars. Some of the board members we're going to get out there educating people about the proper way to park. But we also agreed a time frame and a criteria about how long we would test this out and what would be the determining factor of whether or not it could be successful or not. And we agreed 6 months. And we agreed that at the end of 6 months, we'd get out there and count the cars on Friday and Saturday night and see, have we made any impact at all on how people are complying? And if it's 70% or greater, we'd leave it the way it is. And if it's less than 70%, we would simply fix it, change it back. The 39th Street Association is in favor of the delay and given us an opportunity to do this, with that understanding that at the end of 6 months, that would be our criteria in determining whether or not we go forward. Quite frankly, all the property owners and stake owners don't like it and want it to go. We can't speak to whether or not we find it safer or not. I don't think anybody really knows. But generally, people don't understand what it is. And compliance is 50% at best. I personally own a couple chunks of property down there, and I think it's really dangerous. We've just been very lucky so far that we haven't had a problem. But if you back into one of those parking spaces and you've got pickup trucks on either side of you, getting out of that parking space, you're not a quarter way into that road, you're not a halfway into that road, you are all the way into that street before you can see what's coming. We also serve a really huge and large community that come from all over the state to be on 39th Street. I think our ability to actually educate the community in general about our block and a half on 39th Street is somewhat limited, but we agreed to try. And so that's kind of where the 39th Street Board is at this time. Thank you.
All right, sir, to fill up the form. Thank you very much. Yes, sir. You'd like, well, he had his hand up first.
A lot of good points, Justin Conklin again. But as a patron, talking with other patrons, we feel there is a disconnect between those who may be owning and those who are attending. And we feel very uncomfortable. And it would have been an opportunity maybe for a church or a university or a place of education where people are definitely on point in their mind to try something like this. Once again, this is a bar area where people are drinking and often doing drugs and getting behind the wheel. We don't want to say that's happening, but it is happening. And we've set up a scenario that makes things extremely difficult to keep people in line. So yes, we all want to work together to try things that are new. Let's change the location of that test.
All right, thank you. All right, yes, sir.
Yes, and hopefully no one that's drinking or on any drugs is even trying to park or operating a motor vehicle. But, you know, as far as the delay is concerned, I mean, I feel like the neighborhood has waited long enough to be performing at its tip-top shape. It's been on a long journey, all the way from the 80s. And so I think this is kind of like the last step to put the icing on the cake for the neighborhood. You know, I've seen some of the attempts by the Business Association to do different educational things or try to do some community outreach and everything like that. And, you know, it's not really that effective. They've had a year so far. And I went door to door, went to all the different business owners and had 82% agree to make this change. And if everyone agrees to make this change now, why wait 6 months to make the change later when everyone's ready to go, you know? So.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, anything else? Okay, staff input, please.
All right, you've got our comments before you. I think you've heard a fair amount of input on both sides of this particular issue. I want to go backwards a little bit. There was some commentary on the new speed limit 25-mile-an-hour signs that had gone in. Those were installed after the February meeting, and we did do I want to because I know that there's always a little bit of interest in how have things changed since a regulatory control goes in and the time afterwards. Just by comparison, when those signs first went in, the 39th Street was posted 35 miles an hour, and we had a 27 mile per hour 50th percentile, and that is unchanged from the last time. The 85th percentile was 30. Our current study showed 32 miles an hour. The high speed we had previous to that was 44. Our current high speed is 41. So with respect to a percentage change in this particular section of Northwest 39th Street, reducing the speed limit from 35 to 25 just by posting new signs really hasn't had an effect on any driver behavior, but what it has done is we posted regulatory signs which are more in line with observed driver behavior. With respect to history on this item, it was touched on. Reverse angle parking was instituted on 39th Street, and it was included in the Oklahoma City project PC 0611, and the City Council had first reviewed a preliminary engineering report for this in February of 2020. Ultimately, the Commission received that study and considered reverse angle parking at its meeting on January 22nd in 2021, at which point in time the request was approved. Signs have been updated in the area. The original signs that were first installed were replaced later on in November of 2022 with a larger series of signs. One of which is regulatory in nature, and the other one is diagrammatic, and it provides some instruction for drivers as far as to how to park in the reverse angle parking spaces. And beyond that, action on the item will be at the discretion of the Commission. I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have on the application.
Thank you very much. Do we have a motion concerning item 5A?
In the interest of motivating some good neighborly conversation, I move for a 6-month continuance.
Okay, we have a motion to continue item 5A from Commissioner Littlefield. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second by Commissioner Cornett. Do we have any discussion?
I guess my motion suggested that we do. Kyle, if you could come up for a moment, please. I want to visit with you about something. What I think we're dealing with here is a situation where, yes, it's been a year, and yes, it's an awkward animal. But I think that there are things that haven't been given a fair chance to address the back-end parking, to give it a fair chance. And there's a couple of things that I recognized from our January discussion that we had when you were applying for the stop signs. You made a comment that the stop signs, if they were there, would help give time for people to back into those spaces. And I took that as being a comment that was positive towards keeping the back-end parking spaces and giving the stop signs an opportunity to help make that a better situation. And I vocally supported that in your application. The other comment that I want to make is in your letter on today's application, you also make a comment that the speed is too high. That hasn't changed from back in February. So now we have two situations where we have an always stop control and we have a lower speed limit posted. And I think that it's fair, given the conversation that we had, to give those two things alone an opportunity to help make this back-end parking successful. The other thing that, through conversation out, between that date and today, other conversations that, in educating myself, that I've been involved with city staff and with the association president, is one of the things that's been missing unintentionally is a real community-based patron to business owner or property owner communication on what these parking spaces, why they're there, which is to respect an effort in Oklahoma City to respect and give an opportunity for bicycle mobility in our city. It may not be there to a level that we all think now, but I'm a believer that with the structure that's being put in place and these auxiliary things that are going around them, it's going to happen in the very near future. I think we're going, my hope is that we see that when that connectivity happens on 39th Street. So what I feel is more than fair and shows such goodwill on the part of your community over there is, let's see what the stop sign does. Let's see what the lowered speed limit does. Let's see what an education effort can do, which you've got the backing of the city on that. I believe that John and I learned from the planning director that they're willing to help you make a format on an 8.5 by 11 or perhaps larger that can be posted on all the patrons' doors. There can be a stack of them available at bars and cash registers or wherever, and they could be passed out on vehicles that aren't parking appropriately as an effort to make this work. One of the things that I don't understand, that I have tried to wrap my head around since the very first day I heard about back-in parking, is it, to me, is the simplest, easiest form of parallel parking on the planet. It's parallel parking. It's just the vehicles are stacked differently. It doesn't matter how long a vehicle is or how short a vehicle it is. You're not going to worry about hitting bumpers, front and back bumpers, backing in. I'm almost to the belief that we've tried too hard with signage and other things, perhaps. I'm just speaking off the top of my, but maybe we've made it more complicated than it really is. But if you, as the applicant, are willing to agree to a 6 months continuance instead of altering, perhaps me having to alter my motion to deny it, it might be a really good thing to see what happens if you all put the effort in. Now, the criteria that John and Mr. Butler and I talked about was getting this educational program put together quickly, get it implemented. I believe that he even said that he had staff that would be willing to come out and help at certain times of the day, distribute flyers on vehicles or whatever, which I think is awesome. And have, kind of set a time like, 60 days from now or 45 days from now, you guys come back to us or report back to Mr. Chai or whoever, pictures of this is what we've done with these flyers, this is how many we have, this is how we're putting them out. And then after the 6 month period is up, as John mentioned, have staff come out there and take a look at what compliance is. I think it's worth the effort for your community, and I think it's worth the effort for the city at large to agree to try a little harder than just completely deny it or completely get rid of it. That's my stance. So you have an opportunity to agree to the continuance if you wish. Or ask me any questions you wish, or anybody else up here that you wish.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your input and everything. I do disagree. I think that this is an important thing that we need to decide on now to do. It's a lot of resources and effort to try to do an educational campaign all of a sudden in order to just revisit this thing 6 months just to find that, the public is still not complying to it, and you're gonna end up changing it back to forward-facing parking anyway. It just seems like a lot of effort to put into something that really just the community as a whole doesn't really want. But I do understand where you're coming from with trying to give education more of a chance. To be honest, unless they're free condoms and lube, I don't think anybody's going to pick up any flyers that are sitting on the bars that has to do with any traffic. trust me, I've been trying for the past month to pass out my things, so it doesn't really have, people don't really have an interest in that, but what they do, and not everyone has the courage to come up here and kind of like speak on something like this either. You know, I feel like the public, they complain about it constantly. I'm at my store, I have 2 big windows that overlook the street. It's constantly honking, you know, people backing up, and then a whole train of people that have to back up just in order to let one person park backwards. In order to back and park, the front of your car has to go over the oncoming traffic lane. So you're just lucky if a car is making sure not to drive too fast or is slowing down enough so that they don't clip the front of your car. So you kind of have to wait. It just causes a cluster on both sides of the street, and it's just, and it just turns into a mess pretty quickly when you have multiple cars trying to park or move or do different things at the same time. Rainbow Bistro also didn't mention the exhaust fumes. We have a lot of people that are walking their dogs and pedestrians walking, and now his cafe has outside dining. You know, if anyone's in their car running their car, the exhaust fumes just flow directly into the businesses. And if you're trying to eat a sandwich, and you have someone's car's exhaust parked facing right in front of you, it's going to discourage people from wanting to eat outside and make the neighborhood look lively. And it's just going to discourage people from wanting to come to the district as a whole. You know, it's just going to become way too complicated of a place to come try to visit and just try to have a good time if there's all of these, you know, educational packets and info about parking, and people don't like it, and then some people are trying it. And I think that I talked to a few people in the business association. I think their biggest fear is some sort of fear that the city is going to start ticketing people if they're parked incorrectly. And so there's this big effort to try to come up with educational material to educate the public, because, you know, there's this fear that, you know, we're about to get targeted for ticketing folks in order to enforce it. I just think all of this is a lot of effort for really no reason. We can just change the parking just like how they have it in Plaza District, just like how they have it all over town, basically. And it's just something that I really feel like we need now before the summer.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
If I may, if I may, you need to help me understand then, in February.
About that, actually, I had already
You need to help me understand those 2 things, the motivation for supporting lowering the speed limit and an always stop, because it would help with the back-in parking, specifically stated that way. And then you also need to help me with what educational program you have witnessed in the district on back-in parking, because to my knowledge, the only thing that really exists there is signage. There hasn't been a real effort to put a flyer under somebody's windshield wiper or post something on a door. And the other thing that makes 39th Street stand out very dramatically from the other examples that you've given is a bike infrastructure. And we're trying to build a city that over time is putting less and less accommodation on vehicles and more accommodations on mass transit, walking, and biking. So that's where I stand. But if you can help me answer the 2 questions about your comments about why we want to lower the speed limit and why we want to put in an always stop, and then share with me what educational program you've witnessed there in the past year, that might help us.
Yes, thank you for that, and sorry for the confusion. I actually had submitted like the 3 topics all close around the same time as each other. So the topic for the back-end parking just happened to be the last thing that was talked about. So I didn't know that was going to be the last thing, and that the speed limit would be changed and the stop sign would be put in when I wrote that letter about the back-end parking. So that just explains that time difference there. That letter was written way back when. And then what was the other portion of that?
Excuse me. What have you witnessed since the installation of the back-end parking on the 39th Street district that you would call an educational program, besides signage?
The only other thing that I've seen, and the efforts of the 39th Street District social media campaigns, they've made flyers and posted them on social media and everything. And their latest one was telling people that if they don't park correctly, that the city has told them that they're going to start getting tickets. They're giving tickets out to people, and that's created a lot of frustration with members of the community. So on the 39th Street District page, it says, did you know that they're going to start issuing tickets out to people parked incorrectly? Which I don't know is true or not, but it's being put out there as a fear and as a concern. So,
I don't believe that that's true. And I've made the statement to some folks that I've been visiting with over the past month or so regarding this application that we do not cite violators during this 6-month process. That we do not do that. That we just work on education. So again, my plea is goodwill. Work with a little bit harder with the program for a little bit longer, and revisit it in 6 months and see how that goes. One of my other concerns that I'm not as educated on as I should be, just because I'm not involved in it, but I'm a big believer in neighborhood associations and business associations. I'm a big believer that participation in those organizations build great things and accomplish great things. There is a business association on 39th Street, and I've been made aware that all 3 of these items were not presented to the association where they could have schedule a meeting of all the property owners or all the members of the association and get a consensus of what everybody feels that way compared to a petition. So I'm going to stick to my motion. I would like to stick to my motion. I would like to hear a little bit more from staff about, in conjunction with this educational program, is there any additional better kind of signage that we can look at, like something on the curb itself or something on the parking stall itself? Hear a little bit more from staff about what they're willing to offer the district in regard to tools for the educational purposes. So I have no further questions for you. I really appreciate you, and I really admire you. I admire all of you. But it's a bigger picture than just people coming to a place to park and do something. It's a big effort to make this bicycle structure work.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Mr. Littlefield.
And Kyle?
I'll email you some things about how I've tried to work with the business association before and how there's been some gatekeeping efforts. I think you'd find it really interesting to read all that stuff.
And also, Kyle, just a really quick check. We believe, first look, that as long as you park in the parking space going in the angle of the parking space, that's okay. So there's nothing about back it in, forward in, or anything. It's just as long as you're parking in the angle. So that's the first thing. But to get to that space from the other lane, you cross the double yellow, which is a violation of the law. You're not allowed to cross a double yellow line. So that's a violation. To be able to get from a right lane and pull in like that, you'd have to cross the center line. So just to clarify, a quick look, and it was just a quick look by the captain, that appears as long as you're in the parking space, that's all that matters. Okay, so I just want to throw that out there. Okay, so let me go around to the commissioners. Anybody else have some comments? Ma'am, you have a comment?
Sure. Yeah, so and you hit the nail on the head, Mr. Henry, that if you're complying, it's a great fit, and it is so much safer for everybody involved, including people who are getting out of their cars and are not walking out into traffic to get back to the sidewalk. They're going straight to the sidewalk. But if there's a huge compliance issue, then that, to me, is a bigger undertaking is the education piece. I do think that we should have a continuance while we work on these efforts. I'm also wondering, I drove through the other day and saw that obviously there are signs telling you how to back in, but there's nothing on the adverse side saying like, don't cross the line to pull into these spots. And I'm wondering if we can have some kind of signage that just reiterate, and I know we love signs, but is that something that we could potentially add on to the opposite side of, like, do not cross the yellow line, do not forward angle park in these spots, or something at the curb where there are just a couple along that curb line that if you do pull in and you see that sign, it's like, oh, whoops, and then you try to correct it immediately so that people don't see that every car is parked that way and that that is what they're supposed to do.
Well, there are the signs back in November were changed. There used to be a single, like, a single sign that had provided a lot of instruction, and it wasn't very readable because there was a lot of material, a lot of information on that sign. And it's since been split up so that it's now, one is a diagram showing the proper means of reverse angle parking, and the other one is more regulatory in nature that says reverse angle parking only. So as far as regulatory signs go, I mean, those have been replaced.
I'm just saying that you see those whenever you are passing, like those are right before you hit the angled parking that you're backing into, but there's no sign that says like, hey, whoa, 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 don't cross over into these parking lanes on the opposite side of those signs. Does that make sense? So on the back side of those signs, something that's like no forward angle parking sign, or something that kind of is working both lanes of traffic, either way that you're looking. Does that make sense? I feel like I need to draw a diagram.
No,
Okay.
We'll have to do some exploration on that.
Well, that's a good point. Now, is this angle parking on both sides of the street? Okay, yeah, so you would want to say that to both ways, like she's saying, on the back of the sign facing the other way, saying, don't come here. Stay on your side. Yeah, stay on your side. Something like that, sir. That's just something to look at. That's a good point.
Yeah,
Okay?
well, in exploring something like that, typically our signs are oriented so they're rotated about a 45-degree angle to the road. So signs to post something on the back side of that would be facing totally away from traffic. We'd probably need a separate sign altogether.
Okay, well, just something to look at. Okay, sir?
Mr. Wenger and I visited a little bit about some ideas on that. I don't know if you've gotten anywhere on looking into it, but one of the things that I suggested was on the curb in the stall, back in parking only. Something like that, some kind of signage like that might be very beneficial during this trial. And the other thing that I wanted to comment is it seems as though the striping itself is fading. The striping itself could use a lift. But have you had an opportunity to see if that kind of signage is possible?
So when the sign questions first came up, I mean, we were engaging with the planning department to try to find an alternative sign, which is the one that was just mentioned where it was removed, and we put up 2 new signs to make it more clear. I mean, Public Works, and I'm sure planning too, is committed to looking at a 3rd sign if there's something. We've researched some other cities on what they're using, and what we have is very similar. We can look at maybe potential for curb markings. I think what we find with curb markings is they usually, I think they're good in concept, but they're not usually seen as well. They do get a lot more wear and tear on them as the tires do touch those curbs in a lot of cases as a bumper block. If it's wet, if debris forms a little bit in that gutter line, if it's snow at all, it will cover it up. Obviously, that won't happen this summer from a snow's perspective, but that's where we just have some experience with like painted curbs and fire lanes and things like that. But, you know, we're willing to look at any of these opportunities through if there is this 6-month deferment to support whatever we can on new education through signage, or potentially we can look at possibly some paint options too. Refreshing the stall stripes, if they're faded, we can probably do a quick refresh on those to make that commitment as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything over here? Well, as you're thinking, you know, it was some really good points about using the reverse angle parking on one-way streets, so you don't have the problem of something coming the other way. I also like the comment about if it's a 4-lane street, where you could pull up and start backing up and somebody could go around you. Those were two good inputs, so thanks on that. And that's something for the Planning Commission for future thinking, that the one-way street seems like one of the good fixes. Not that we want to make that street a one-way, but for that kind of parking. I also want to just mention that this conversation happened 2-3 years ago when it first came about to do the reverse angle parking. And I think several of us were not very much sold on it. And that's why we asked them to redesign the curbing to be able to take a very easy restriping, because we weren't really sold that it would work. So I just want everybody to know that there's no big cost in changing it because of our concerns in the past. But we do have the concern about the bike traffic, and we are trying to become extremely bike-friendly, as we are with walkers, trying to get that to be part of who we are, but of course we're a very car city. That's always been our problem, is we're a very car city, and that's out of the urban area out that way, of the core. So I just wanted to talk about those things, just to refresh our memory about how we felt about this whole thing when it happened. Had good reasons, it was explained, all that, so, and you had something, sir.
I'm just a big believer that, yes, as the city moving forward, we want to be sure and look at the bike, pedestrians, just the number of traffic. But I also understand when you've got 82% support, I hope that 6 months from now when we revisit that we'll take that aspect into it, because these are people with boots on the ground. They see this every day. And if and what we decide, they're going to have to live with. So I do support the 6-month delay to find out if we can do some educational things. But I think that after 6 months, if you come back with that 82%, I think we need to follow up and change that.
I want to add one final thing, or if anybody else wants to add a final thing, but I think one of the problems with education is that this is the only place in the entire city that has this type of parking, and if we want people to know what it looks like and know how to act around it, then we need to have more of it. And so for us to say only this one section of street gets this treatment and we're going to test it out, well, it's not going to be a test that succeeds because people are not used to it. They're not practicing every single day. With parallel parking, with regular angled parking, those are things that they see, they encounter every single time they drive into the city. This is something that is very specific to less than a mile stretch of road in a very specific area. And so I think if we want to talk about the future and when they come back in 6 months and say this worked or this didn't work, if there's another request for reverse angle parking, I don't think we can turn it down based on this. I think we really need to actually look at how can we incorporate this in other places of the city so that people become more familiar with it and become more comfortable with it, so that it is a regular occurrence that people can be comfortable with, because it is a lot safer than forward angled parking.
Okay. Any other talk on this item? Okay. We have a motion to defer item 5A to defer for 6 months until they're able to make a report to staff of the efforts of their education. For 6 months from Commissioner Littlefield, seconded by Commissioner Cornett. Okay, I think we're ready to vote.
I vote for the continuance.
Okay. Okay. Item has passed, so the item is deferred. All in favor? Okay. We go on now to item 5B, Terrence Hayes, PE President, SMC Consultant Engineers, to consider 9 different things, and they're all listed right up there on the screen. Is that okay, Counselor? I don't need to read them? Thank you very much, Counselor. Okay, do we have somebody here to speak on this item? Sir, if I can have your name and address, you'll have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioners. Appreciate being here. My name is Terrence Haynes, 815 West Main. I'm with SMC Consulting Engineers. And with your permission, I would like to pass out a couple of photographs. The first one that I'm passing out is the construction site as of about 9:15 this morning. And the second one is the full build-out concept drawing for Oak Development.
If you just give it to the staff so they can get a copy and they'll pass it out for you. Oh, yeah, or you, yeah, Mary will take care of it. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mary. I really don't have much to add to the report, to the staff's report. It's very professionally done and very thorough. We've had many discussions about this development. We're very excited to be here. As you can see, the ongoing construction in the picture that was taken this morning off of Penn Tower. I have an opportunity to be able to see it almost every day, and it's really exciting. So this request before you, the 9 items that are before you, is basically for lay-by parking as well as designated passenger drop-off pickup areas, which are an integral part of the Oak development. Just very quickly, as a reminder, Oak Development is a multi-use type of facility. It will include a boutique hotel along Pennsylvania Avenue, a multifamily, which sits on top of multifamily apartments that sit on top of a retail podium with the interior parking structure, and that interior parking structure holds the majority of the parking spaces for this development. So the lay-by parking on the street, as well as along with the ADA accessible spaces that are designated, are in support, but we are asking as part of this application to limit the time of parking out there more or less as pickup for fast food or the vendor foods or just pickup items and that sort of thing. Whereas most of the parking will occur within the parking structure. And then on the south side of 50th Street will also be parking for this development. And then as it grows, and this is just the first phase, as it grows, we're looking at other opportunities to include more parking structures, more retail along the frontage of 50th Street on the south side, and then as well as the southwest corner of Oak and 50th Street. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have after you've read through the packet, and look for your approval. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Anybody else want to speak on item 5B? Okay, staff input, please.
You've got our comments before you. Probably the most telling thing on this application is that they provided reserved parking spaces for the physically disabled in compliance with current practices for providing at least one space per 25 and using a circular block basis. So they've got full-time loading zones, 30-minute parking, and reserved spaces for the disabled in the areas that are highlighted on the map before you. All other locations are requesting parking be restricted. I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have on the application.
Thank you very much. Do we have a motion concerning item 5B?
I move for approval of all items.
I have a motion to approve item 5B from Commissioner Littlefield. Do we have a second?
Second by Varnell.
Second by Commissioner Varnell. Do we have any discussion? Yes, sir.
It is so cool for me to be witnessing this happening. I was very much involved in the planning phases years ago. And one of the things that we were considering was traffic calming through the development, and also how 50th would line up with 50 Penn Place, and then how 50th on the east side would work with the neighborhood. And I'm really pleased to see the on-street parallel parking. In my world, that's a traffic calming measure.
Yes.
The one question that I have, and as I've grown into the years that I've gotten into, I've become more and more aware of handicap parking. And I'm curious how is it a 30-minute limit applied to the handicap parking spaces as well?
It is in
Typically,
this
yes.
application.
Yeah, because like in the downtown area, where parking is predominantly either time limited or in a lot of cases it's metered, all the city's meters run a 2-hour cycle. And the way our codes are structured, they're written so that a person with disabilities can park in a metered space without paying, or they can park in a reserved space for the disabled. But in the event that they park in like a regular space, they're still limited to the same time constraints that everyone else parks.
I only ask that because sometimes I wonder what I could accomplish or others could accomplish in a 30-minute time period in a parking space, depending on what the nearest use to that parking space is. It's just something that I think about. It's not going to get in the way of my motion to approve it, but it's an interesting conversation to me.
Well, the 30 minutes, as he said, is you call in, something's ready, you park, you go get it, and you leave. You don't eat it there at the place, you don't eat it in your car. It's just, and it's to flow the traffic so other people can come in and get it. Am I right, sir? Is that?
Yes, sir, that's correct. And if I may add that the parking structure has a substantial number of accessible parking spaces that are not time limited,
There you go.
as well as the parking on the south side of Fifth.
I very much appreciate hearing that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other talk on item 5B?
And that parking structure is a free parking structure?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Key thing to know there.
Yep, keynote. Okay, any other talk on 5B? Okay, we have a motion to approve item 5B from Commissioner Littlefield, seconded by Commissioner Varnell. We're ready to vote. And vote.
I vote for approval.
Item has passed with all in favor. Okay? Thank you. We go on now to item 5C, Michael Jackson, to consider a speed limit on North Oklahoma Avenue between Northeast 16th and Northeast 16th Place and Northeast 13th from 40 miles to 35 miles per hour. 2, change the speed limit on North Oklahoma Avenue between Northeast 13th Street and Northeast 10th Street from 40 miles per hour to 35. And 3, change the speed limit on North Oklahoma Avenue between Northeast 10th Street and Northeast 2nd Street from 40 to 25 miles an hour. We have anybody here to speak on this item? All right, staff input.
All right, in this particular item, Mr. Jackson submitted a request, and his initial area of interest was Oklahoma between Northeast 16th Street, Northeast 16th Place, and Northeast 13th Street. He's got a business that he operates on the west side of this particular road in between these cross streets. At the time we received the request, we noted the fact that Oklahoma Avenue is was somewhat of an outlier with respect to posted speed, in as much as it had been posted 40 miles an hour. Of course, that speed limit was approved by the Traffic Commission years before. So in looking at the application, we went ahead and looked at, taking this as an opportunity to look at adjusting the remaining speed limit from Oklahoma from 13th Street South to where it terminates at Northeast 2nd Street. And so staff, in addition to, added parts 2 and part 3. In part 2, we're proposing to continue the requested 35-mile-an-hour limit down as far as south as 10th Street, and then between 10th Street and 2nd Street, where the nature of development along Oklahoma Avenue changes dramatically, we're looking at a 25-mile-an-hour limit, which would make it more in line with the paralleling north-south streets. The study that's currently up, it's a graphical study that's up on the screen before you. We had done speed studies where we were looking at the observed 50th and 85th percentile speeds. We'd also used the Bella Light methodology to kind of verify what we were looking at and what we were trying to basically come up with as far as appropriate speeds. In the section between 16th Street and 13th Street, a 35-mile-an-hour limit would be perfectly appropriate, because currently the 50th percentile speed's running around 29, the 85th is running around 32, even though it's posted 40. So that the applicant's portion of the request is just fine. When you go south of 13th Street, between 13th Street and the I-235 off-ramp, it's the 50th percentile is running 31, and the 85th is running 38. This is a section where we have recommended continuing the 35-mile-an-hour limit further to the south. Now, speed does take a jump when you go from the I-235 off-ramp to Northeast 10th Street, but that's typically because traffic coming off I-235 has been running at highway speeds, and they're typically still decelerating as they get down towards 10th Street. Our 50th percentile speed's actually close to the currently posted speed limit, and the 85th percentile is even higher, but it's just a function of location. Of course, there's really not that much in the way of businesses and business access that's affected in this last section. And then the section from 10th Street down to 2nd Street is rather unique. Our study found that the 50th percentile speeds are running around 21 miles an hour, and our 85th percentiles are running around 26. In this particular section of Oklahoma Avenue, it's got a number of cross streets. I mean, you've got 9th, 8th, 7th, all the way down to 2nd Street, all the way through this particular stretch. There's an all-way stop that's at Oklahoma and, I believe, 4th Street. There are it's a substantial amount of development on both sides of the roadway, and our Bella Light methodology found that a speed limit even lower than 35 was probably, would be appropriate for this stretch. Considering that there are a number of residential uses on both sides of the street, there's a bicycle lane present on the west side of the roadway. We believe that a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit was a better fit for this particular section. And so those are the recommendations before you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on Mr. Jackson's application and the staff's component of the same request.
Okay, do we have a motion concerning 5C?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve Mr. Jackson's application with the excellent input from the Traffic Services Division.
Okay, we have a motion to approve item 5C from Commissioner Schuline. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Cornett. Any discussion? Just to clarify, what did he recommend or ask for? Just part one?
His component was just changing from 40 to 35 on the section of Oklahoma between 16th and 13th Street.
Right.
But we took the opportunity
you
to look at it
everything else.
and see if it made sense to continue that down to its logical end at 2nd Street.
Nope, very good. Yep.
So the motion does include your recommendation?
Yeah, it's items 2 and 3.
Perfect.
I just want to say thank you for doing that, for continuing that on and seeing that there was a potential for us to look at the street as a whole, because it has developed so much in that corridor. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, any other discussion? 5C. Okay, we have a motion to approve 5C from Commissioner Schuline, seconded by Commissioner Cornett. Votes, please.
Vote for approval.
I'm the one. Me, sorry. I was on the wrong screen. There we go, yay. Okay, item has passed. We're all in favor. Okay, we go on now to item 5D, and we'll shoot traffic signal at Bogard Boulevard and Northwest 15th Street. Sir, if I could have your name and address, you have up to 5
I'm Andrew
minutes.
Sachs. I'm with Coach Field Service. Yeah, this is another probably request for...
What's your address, please?
3150 Northwest 149th.
Okay, thank you.
Between Bogart and 149th, which is short of this intersection. Yeah, this is probably another request for a non-funded streetlight, so I'm going to go forth with that. I'm sure the police department, Lieutenant Lindsay, there's a lot of accidents at this intersection and a lot of speeding. I see police officer daily there, several times a day, policing, and they're doing a good job. But that intersection to go west, when you're heading north to go west, there's a line sight problem, and it's quite dangerous to go west there. I think it's contributed to some of the accidents we've had there. During rush hour, it starts backing up with a dual lane, and so the people who want to go west can't see right, but they can't really see the traffic because the road's a little bit of a rolling hill, and so the viewpoint is shortened, and I've seen cars nearly hit one another trying to go out west. Conversely, when you're going to go east in rush hour, there's all these cars trying to go west, and so you can't see traffic coming. So it's been quite of a dangerous intersection. That's where, if you guys know where Costco's new, travel center is, it's just a busy road, and it's out of Coral Springs Industrial Park, heading north. One other thing I would add is the drive up to the intersections is in an incline, which makes it a little more difficult to see. It looks like a 5 to 10 degree. I can't speak about the incline, but it's unusual that you have an incline coming to the road where you're having trouble seeing both left and right.
You can see it there.
There's an apartment complex straight away, which has about 175 units.
All right. Anything else, sir?
That's it.
All right. Anybody else wanted to speak on 5D? All right. Staff input?
All right, you've got our staff comments before you. This is not the first time the commission has heard a request. Back in January of 2017, Ms. Martha Wheeler, who was a resident at the Bryant Apartment Homes, which is directly opposite Bogart Parkway and on the north side of Northwest 150th Street, had made a request. As is obvious, that particular request was considered but not approved at that time. In this particular location, when we ran our traffic signal warrant analysis, we found that the 8-hour warrant for considering a traffic signal was not met. The intersection almost met the 4-hour warrant, which is warrant 2, and it did satisfy the volume criteria for meeting warrant number 3, which is a peak hour warrant. Absolutely.
I noticed some of that, testing was during spring break. So there could be a reduction in cars because was a slow week. Even getting for myself was quite easier than normal. There's a child care just west of that intersection. And so I just don't think the traffic was typical. Thank you.
Yeah, so anyhow, but presently the intersection does meet one warrant, fully meet one warrant for considering use of traffic signal. The way that the manual on uniform traffic control devices is written, a location could be considered eligible for considering signalized traffic control if it meets any of the 9 warrants. So it doesn't need to meet 3 or 5. If it meets 1, it would be sufficient to be considered. This particular intersection does present challenges because the driveway on the north side from the Bryant Apartment Homes lines up with the northbound lanes on Bogart Parkway. So unless there is either an effort or action from the apartment homes to either relocate their driveway further to the west or in some manner radically reconstruct the driveway on the north side, what we would have to do if a signal is approved at this particular location, north-south traffic would have to be, those phases would need to be split. They could not run simultaneously. And also east-west left turns, because of the offset for the apartment home driveway from the northbound lane of Bogart Parkway, you couldn't run east and westbound left turns simultaneously. They would have those movements also would have to be split. So the only traffic movements, if signalized, with everything remaining as it is, that could run concurrently would be east-west traffic could move together. But other than that, all the other traffic movements would have to be split. So as far as traffic signal efficiency and operation goes, it can be done in a safe manner. It will not be a very efficient intersection to operate unless the roadway was significantly altered. And if the commission does make a motion to consider approving a signal at this intersection, staff would recommend that it be done so with widening 150th Street for east and westbound left turns. Beyond that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on the application.
All right. Do we have a motion concerning item 5D?
I move to deny the application.
We have a motion to deny item 5D from Commissioner Varnell. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Commissioner Hale. Do we have any discussion on 5D?
I'll speak up since I drive this intersection every single day. Mr. Sachs is correct. There's a lot of speeding going on there, and Police Officer Bryant Smith writes a lot of tickets over there. I see him in my parking lot every day. But with only meeting one of the 9 warrants, I know it satisfies where it can be considered. I think we're talking about just a short period of time to disrupt a lot of traffic. And taking into consideration the apartment complex on the north side and having to do what Stuart just suggested, I just don't think this is a good fit for the traffic volume at this time.
Well, as we know with traffic lights, you can adjust them as needed. So 2 o'clock in the morning, you got the normal traffic flowing around. Somebody pulls up, then it would activate and go. When there's no traffic coming off the side streets or out of the apartment, the light would just stay green. So you can do that as far as if they're going to be changing that whole intersection by adding left turn lanes, a modification to the entry could maybe be made to push it that way. The city may want to go ahead and just include that and to make it just a straight access. You know, that's something that maybe could happen. Okay. Anybody else have some comments on item 5D? Okay, we have a motion to deny item 5D by Commissioner Varnell, seconded by Commissioner Hale. Can we have your votes, please?
I vote for the denial.
Item has passed, which is to deny item 5D, and all were in favor. Just one point that was mentioned by the applicant. You know, when you do these studies, especially around schools and stuff like that, could you either maybe do 2 to show out of school time and if the timing fits? But an example with that area right there especially, you know, there's probably a good number of students that go in and out, drive out of that area, to think about that whether it's spring break or not spring break or whatever.
And typically, we work to be cognizant of that. In this particular case, though, when we ran our warrant analysis, ordinary school traffic would not be something that we would see that much of on Bogart Parkway. You would see more of the influence on that on 150th Street.
Right, yeah, but it would have plussed that number up on 150th.
Well, Northwest 150th Street, as far as meeting signal warrants, it had sufficient volume for considering use of a signal. Right. It was the side street volumes coming out of the commercial and industrial areas in the office complexes, which didn't really meet the warrants.
Okay.
The only time it did meet warrant was for the peak hour, which is not a warrant which is always applicable. It's only useful if you've got an area where you've got like a factory or you've got a lot of commercial office buildings complexed together, and Bogart Parkway satisfied that particular criteria, and that is the one that it did manage to meet. And even with even being potentially during the spring break, it nearly met the criteria for the 4-hour warrant. But like I said, the challenge at this particular intersection is the horrible geometrics that we've got because of the apartment driveway on the north side. Now, if that apartment driveway wasn't at that location, then this would probably be a better candidate for considering a traffic signal, but the driveway presents special issues that we can't ignore.
All right, well, thank you very much. Also, Captain, maybe just a comment from the officer, if you could get something to him that he was recognized by the Traffic Commission. He'll call. Okay, comments from citizens. Any other people want to talk here? Okay. Reports from other traffic commissioners. Go to Commissioner Varnell.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Littlefield.
Yeah, I'll be quick. This is kind of a cool endeavor. It's very grassroots, and I'm not asking for any action today. I'm just going to speak up that there's the planning commissioner in Ward 2, Janice Powers, and a couple of staff folks in the planning department, we've been having this real casual conversation about revisiting what Commissioner Schuline and I brought up years ago in conjunction with the traffic calming program that we called it at the time, was some kind of a cross-communication between the Traffic Commission and the Planning Commission. We've had some good dialogue about that, and a good example of why that could be a good thing for us to look into would be this example today of what we learned about how traffic lights are funded, and how the planning department can have a role with new developments in ensuring that they're responsible in one way or another, getting that light there for that neighborhood that's been there for 25 years. So what Commissioner Powers and I sort of agreed to was in her commission and in our commission, establishing a subcommittee with a chairman and look into this and see how that would work. What would be, how would staff be involved? How would we make that work where we can serve our citizens better with these things? So that's my comment. Just kind of think about it, and maybe have a comment in the future about it, and we'll see what we can do. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Go to Commissioner Hale.
Nothing to add, sir.
Commissioner Schuline. Commissioner Cornett.
I'm all good, thank you.
Okay, Captain.
Yeah, I didn't have a report necessarily, but when the discussion got going about the back-end parking, I have to be honest, I probably haven't ever taken any enforcement on back-end parking. And I guess maybe that's the only place in the city, if I'm wrong, so I don't know that I've even really experienced very much. So I'm just hesitant I don't want to give information that could be inaccurate, but as it came up, I was trying to play the scenarios in my head and try to look at ordinances. And the only one I could find talked about that if the director has established what angle the car has to be parked at, it has to be at that angle. Because when you talk about the regulatory signs, it seemed like there's signage that says you must back in. But so in my mind, when the answer was given that if you're at the angle, because I pictured whether I'm facing forwards or backwards, I'm technically still parked at the angle that the lines are, which is where my opinion came in that, well, maybe that's not actually a violation. But there's lots of ordinances, so maybe if there's a sign regulating it, maybe there's a different ordinance that's being violated. And I don't say that to say that, hey, we're going to come out and do some enforcement for education. That's not what I mean. I just don't want to give any possible inaccurate information. But that's why when I read it and it talks about, well, you just have to be at the angle that's directed, I think technically whether I'm facing forwards or behind, I'm still actually at the angle. But if there's a sign saying you have to back in, that just kind of was confusing to me. So.
Yep, that's very good. But the key was, I don't think the city put out anything that said we're going to start to write you up.
No, I don't know of anything that
right.
we're like
Yeah,
on some movement to enforce.
That's where I was just
Yeah,
trying to go.
absolutely.
That I don't think we were going to say that. Counselor, you got anything for us?
Not in particular, but I do think there may be an ordinance, and I'll have to check to be certain, but parking anywhere where you're disregarding what the sign is telling you may be an offense. So in that case, even if you were parked at the right angle, if you're going the wrong way, it could be an offense. But I'll take a look and just report back for everybody's information next month.
Very good. All right, thank you all. Staff, anything else?
Well, no, and to add to what Captain Lindsay just mentioned, like 90-degree angle parking to the curb, you can park head in or reverse in something like that. And in a case like that, there is no, it's parking at the correct angle is what's specified, but the direction which your vehicle is oriented in the space is not specified. So it would be one of the...
Well, that's a good, that's a good legal thing to ask. That's why we pay these guys the big bucks.
And then speaking of angle parking, we are working on the angle parking ordinance, and we should have that for consideration next month.
Oh, very good. Very good. Okay, do we have any other business for the Traffic Commission today? All right, we're adjourned.